Deb Dodge, and I'm chair of the Town of Camden's Charter Commission. Welcome to our public meeting tonight. The Commission's role tonight is to listen to your questions and answer your questions and listen to your comments. The town voted to create this commission in 2019, and we started work in the fall of 2019. And in spite of the group's breadth of experience, including budget committee members, select board, planning board, ZBA, personnel board, comprehensive plan, in spite of that, we struggled in the beginning on deciding on how to approach a charter that had not been revised or fully reviewed in 40 years. There had only been a series of amendments. So we discovered that it was a really big task to even decide on how to proceed. We realized that 40-year-old charter needed modernization, needed to be brought up to date with current Maine statutes and references. The format needed to be more accessible. Various duties scattered throughout the charter needed consolidation. One of the first things we tackled was our form of government, town council or a hybrid versus town meeting. We looked at other towns and how they were structured. We still believe that the town meeting form is the right structure for us at this time. That may change. Methods may need to change in the future. But what we believe, what we have drafted, is a good foundation for the town going forward. Future considerations of any change in structure will not have to deal with a 40-year-old charter. We looked at how to bring the charter in line with current practices in the administration of the town, financial procedures, including the budget process, endowment fund management, and long-range planning. We also realized we needed to provide a process to make sure another 40 years did not go by before revisiting the charter. COVID certainly had created an obstacle in moving the process of revision, review, and public input forward on a more timely basis. So here we are tonight. This is our second meeting in a month. Looking forward to taking your questions and feedback before we finalize recommendations for the revised charter. What we'll do tonight, we have a power presentation that has the highlights of the proposed changes to the charter, and we'll take your questions sort of as we go through it rather than saving them up to the end. And if you would come up to the podium and put your name and address and make sure the mic is on, and we need that for the public record. And we'd like you to keep your remarks to 2 or 3 minutes so everyone has a chance to speak. And just for those people who are on YouTube or watching on the cable channel 1303, you may email any questions or comments that you get after watching this meeting to charter@camdenmaine.gov. An email to charter@camdenmaine.gov, and we will follow up with any answers or response to any suggestions you have. So with that, let me make sure everybody knows who is here, up here. Jean White, down in front, Commission Member Bob Oxton, Karen Grove, Lowry Sargent, and Jim Hurd. And for those of us up here, we need to make sure our mics are close to us because it's tough to pick up the volume, particularly if you've got a mask on. Thank you, Bob. So here are the highlights. I already mentioned that we were formed in 2019, and the purpose was to review and propose revisions to the current charter. It's just a list of the other members that are not here are Nancy Cottle Johnson and John French.
Mark Haskell.
Oh, Mark Haskell. Mark. Well, there's a spot for him.
He's definitely not here.
He's definitely not here yet. So we did consider, as I mentioned, a change of a form of government to a hybrid, and the town council, town meeting, town manager form of government shares the legislative power. The form shares the legislative power of the select board. Things such as police and miscellaneous ordinances could be approved solely by the select board, and power to change zoning, appropriations, and borrowing are reserved for the town voters. Or there are some hybrid towns where all ordinances are approved solely by the select board. The pro for that is that it gives the select board or town council more authority to act quickly. Con is that citizens are further removed from the process. To override any ordinance that the council or town council passes would require a citizen petition process. So as I said earlier, our current draft of the revised charter does not change our form of government. We are still a town meeting form of government. The other option was just to give the select board some authority to approve additional appropriations or additional borrowing only during a declared state of emergency, such as COVID-19. And we actually have in the draft a proposal in Article 6, which is the financial section, to allow for emergency funding, but it does require a public hearing. Anybody have any questions or thoughts so far? What is also new in Section 1, which is the powers of the town, we have added a requirement for all proposed ordinances to be reviewed by the town attorney. Petition ordinances haven't traditionally been always reviewed by the attorney to make sure there's consistency with law. So we're proposing that. And, yes. Excuse me, would you come up and state your name and speak in the microphone, please? Well, that's okay. Just for people watching, we want to be able to.
I'm Jonathan Beitler, Camden.
Oh, great, Jonathan.
Would you mind just explaining what warrants are? I don't really know.
The warrant is the list of the ballot questions that are going to be voted on. Articles that people are going to vote on go on a town warrant. And it's a, Bill might be able to explain it in better detail, but it is what you are going to vote on in town meeting, either by secret ballot or in the open town meeting.
Yeah, you know, I have problems with asking an attorney to review things. I think it's needless use of an attorney, needless involvement of an attorney, and a diminution of the power of the select board. We elect people from the select board. We don't elect attorneys or necessarily have confidence in them.
Thank you for your comment. Peter?
Peter Gross, Camden. Just a quick question.
Sure.
When we get to the end, we'll be able to go back and ask questions about sections 1, 2, and 3, or do you want everything addressed as you go through each section?
As we go through, so we're not building it all the way up to the end. If you have a question of something that's not on the highlights or something that, you know, in the early articles.
I don't really have a question, just a comment.
Sure.
First, thank you all. This is how towns should function, with volunteers, people like you. I really appreciate, and I'm sure other people do, all the time you've spent on this. My comment would be on the recommendations on the possible change of the form of government to a hybrid. And I would just comment that I would support allowing the select board to review police and miscellaneous ordinances. But beyond that, I completely support your proposal to remain a town meeting form of government where the power, the authority to make changes in zoning and budgets and things like that solely rests with the citizens of the town of Camden. Excuse me. I hate wearing masks.
Thank you, Peter. Let's see. The change in the composition and eligibility of select board members, we have a slight change. Currently, the current charter allows one part-time employee of the town to be on the select board a year, during 1 year. And we had discussions about conflict of interest, and we eliminated all but part-time firefighters, partly because our feeling was encouraging firefighters, because we have issues with how many firefighters we have, as well as didn't want to eliminate them from the select board. The next change we've made on the select board is the terms, and we have come up with a semi-term limit, three-year terms, taking a break of a year, and then being able to run again and have another three-year terms. Pro, it encourages new people to run for office, and the argument against it, is it even an issue? Jonathan, did you sign in on the paper there?
I'm sorry.
It's okay, if you do that, that'd be great.
So I'm up a bit late, but I wanted to understand so this we allow one part-time person, and now this is an additional person who's a fire person?
No, what we're doing is saying the only part-time employee of the town of Camden that could serve on the select board would be a part-time firefighter.
Okay, and is part-time equal volunteer, or is that different?
Part-time is defined as, currently, as anybody working 20 hours or less, and we were suggesting 30 hours or less, but that's still up for discussion.
Okay, I mean, I think that, certainly if we put volunteer in there, if that's the intent, that might be.
But Bob's,
Could I speak on that?
Sure.
Camden has no volunteers. Volunteers are a thing of the past. We have to be employed now by the town of Camden to come through Maine Municipal Association for workman's comp problems. So there's no more volunteer. It's a member of the fire department, but not a full-time, like the fire chief, the people that work down at the station full-time cannot be a selectman.
Okay.
Just the volunteer,
Okay,
or just the call
yeah,
man.
Okay, I didn't understand. I also wanted to just add that I think that you guys do a fabulous job for the town, devoting all this time to these important issues, and I just want to thank you, just the way Peter did. Thank you.
thank you. One of the other sections under Select Board that we have made some changes to, and that's a section on forfeiture of office and notification of forfeiture. We have added that a Select Board member may be required to forfeit their office if they have 3 unexcused absences within a 6-month period. We're doing that to ensure that whomever is elected has a commitment to the responsibilities. The section also includes considerations for the excused absence, and it allows a method for replacing a non-participating member. In our discussions about it, one of the other comments was that perhaps the select board chair should handle the chronic absenteeism without having a forfeiture mechanism due to absences in the charter. Peter.
I hope this won't be a long meeting.
Sit closer, Peter.
Yeah, sit closer.
First off, a question. Remind me of how a select board member is replaced if they resign or have to forfeit their office, is in this position,
It's in the current charter, and we've actually sort of changed the time frame. There's a time frame within which if a vacancy occurs, that the select board, depending how far out it is from the next town meeting, annual town meeting, they have to call a special town meeting, or if it's within a shorter period of time, they don't have to, and you wait until the next town meeting when you would be electing select board members.
it's an appointed position.
It's not appointed, no. It's still elected by the voters.
Great. And I guess, if they're going to go this route, my recommendation would be not to leave it to the select board chair to handle it. That leaves the door open for personality differences or differences of opinion that could create an issue between a particular chair and a person who's missed maybe 3 meetings for whatever reason.
We do have some factors that need to be considered, and they shall include but not limited to attendance record, circumstances beyond the control of the absent member, professional or family commitments, and illness or medical treatments. So the select board chair, if they're the ones who are going to be making the determination, would be following those factors to take into consideration on whether to say the absence is excused or unexcused.
Still, in my mind, leaves the door open for that kind of conflict of interest.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. We have also added a small section on advisory committees, and it includes some guidelines for establishing a new committee, in which the select board needs to make sure there's a directive for the committee. They appoint a select board liaison to the committee, so it's putting some structure together around the creation of advisory committees. And then also new is a section that deals with a provision to make sure that the charter is looked at every 5 years to see if there are any revisions that are due, as opposed to waiting as long as we have. Yes, Jonathan.
Who does that? Is that spelled out? Who?
It is. It's, here. Somebody get there faster than I can. It is. Charter Review Committee consisting of 5 members shall be appointed every 5th year by the Select Board to review and recommend changes in the charter. In addition to the 5-member committee, a member of the Select Board shall serve as a non-voting advisory member. And then they make a determination whether there's just an amendment to the charter that's due or whether it's a revision. And of course, any amendments or revisions such as we're doing would be going in front of the voters.
If I might make a suggestion, I would suggest that 5 may be a little, 5 plus the selectmen especially, may be a little bit too much. I find that if you have big committees, sometimes everybody doesn't take their responsibility as seriously as they should. And I think that 3 might be something to suggest, because I think that if you're one of 3, you're really going to read it and take responsibility. Just a suggestion.
Thank you.
3 years and 1 year off.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, we talked about that already. I thought we already talked about the
What? 1 year off. Every
the 3 years and 1 year off. And nobody had any
we did.
questions?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry, I missed it.
That's all right. Yeah. One of the other changes is the section that talks about what a quorum is, and currently the charter says 3/5 is a quorum, but we are trying to spell out that it's 3 members constitute a quorum, because if there are 4 people there, is somebody thinking, well, 3/5 of 4 people is how much? So it's just clarifying language.
And that also, that any motion or approval or anything like that to pass requires 3 affirmative votes. So if you were to have only 3 members attend, 2 vote for, 1 votes against, whatever it is, doesn't pass. You have to have 3 affirmative votes. Just, again, to make it really clear, rather than trying to fumble through the math.
When we got to the town manager section, which is Article 3, we discovered that there are town manager duties sprinkled throughout the whole charter. So what we did, and actually as Roger Moody's suggestion, he came to one of our meetings, we tried to go through and consolidate them. So certainly for a new town manager, it's a little bit easier, but you can go to one place and see what the duties are. So there really are not any changes except pulling in those other duties. Section 4 on administrative organization. We did some reorganization. We looked through and found things that were lumped together in this article and found that there were better places for them to reside. And that's what's happened in Article 4. We moved things to the Select Board article, to the Town Manager's article. The one that was sort of out of date, we deleted it, and one regarding bonds, we moved to financial procedure. So it wasn't hanging out there in Article 4 instead of with everything else regarding finance. Article 4 also included the personnel administration, and since the town adopted a personnel policy manual, most of the duties listed in the charter for a personnel board became obsolete because we have a policy manual now that governs all of that. And our recommendation is that they become a personnel advisory committee to the select board. And the personnel board themselves have written a really good directive of what their responsibilities are. And I think I just explained. Yes, Jonathan?
I really like the idea of reviewing a lot of the town charter every 5 years. And I think that part of the personnel board responsibility should be to review the human resources policy, what is?
Oh, policy,
Personnel
policy.
every 5 years. And I think that things go out of date. Lots of things changes, volunteer, I didn't know volunteer firefighters couldn't exist because of insurance regulations. Makes perfect sense to me, but I didn't know it. And I think that that should be done. I happen to be a member of the Personnel Committee, and I sort of, after I got elected, I called and said, what do I do? And basically it was nothing. So anyway, but I do think that that ought to be a useful thing, and I do think it should be spelled out that the Personnel Board should be responsible to the Board of Selectmen, because I think the town manager is sort of is the major person in controlling all of these things, and so this is a different voice than the town manager. If you make it to the town manager, it just seems redundant.
And I think our language does say that it is it doesn't say it here in the PowerPoint, but is an advisory committee to the select board. So it'd be this.
Yeah, but I also like his idea that the Personnel Advisory Board review
Every 5 years.
every 5 years as well. I think that makes a lot of sense.
The language that the Personnel Board came up with, the Personnel Board, Personnel Committee may at its own initiative or at the request of the Select Board recommend revisions to the Town of Camden's personnel policy and rules. We could consider
Say
adding.
at least reviewed
We
every 5 years.
could add something in there, and this is their recommendation, which would go actually in another article talking about recommendations of.
Yeah, I didn't know about the recommendations. I was only elected recently.
Yes,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
I think if it goes in as a recommendation, it needs to be in the select board area, because theoretically, the personnel committee could go away. So, but the select board will always be here.
Oh, so you're saying Select Board review, or
No.
the Select Board cause to
Be
review?
caused to review every 5 years, so that we stay current with regulations and such. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think we make that a select board responsibility,
select
is
board.
they make sure,
That the Personnel Board reviews it, and therefore they have to appoint a Personnel Board.
or personnel committee, which is the direction we're going to. Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense.
And they've got more heft than the personnel committee would have, saying, okay, we need to get this reviewed, let's start on this date, let's end on this date, and this is the people we're going to get involved with it.
All right, and to get to a bit into the weeds, once the Personnel Committee makes the recommendation to change the policy, does that get reviewed by the Select Board, or does that
Yeah.
just become?
No, it does. It goes to the Select Board. And then the Select Board does whatever it would need to do, and then would vote to add it to the policy manual or not. Good comments, thank you.
Yeah. Recommendation.
Yeah. I think I already said that. And there is something about exempt positions and specially classified positions that really belong in the policy manual, not in the charter, because employment laws change. You don't want a charter to be out of date as quickly, so a policy manual is where that belongs, not in the charter. So the next department is the Wastewater Department, and we really haven't made any changes except that we have expanded the funding options for capital improvements. And this gives the wastewater commissioners more options. We have voted to do this in many, many town meetings. And rather than having to decide town meeting by town meeting, we went ahead and put it in the charter that they could, and it's not a must, could use user service charges to help pay for capital improvements. In Article 6, we did a fair amount in Article 6. We restructured the Budget Committee as well as added a section on endowment funds management. One of the things we have done, times have shown us lately that it's very difficult to get people to be on a budget nominating committee. And so instead of trying to recruit people to be on a budget nominating committee, we are having people that are interested in being on the budget committee submit interest forms instead of trying to construct a budget nominating committee. And then I just said that people could basically fill out a committee interest form to be included on the ballot, and they would have to know and have to have that interest form in by the time the town clerk needs to put the ballot together. And the next thing we had done is we are reducing the budget committee from 21 to 25 to 9 regular members and 2 alternate members for a total of 11. And again, this sort of helps eliminate the problem of trying to pull teeth to get people to serve on the budget committee, as well as nominating people by surprise in the town meeting, which has happened many, many years. Camden is the only town we have been able to find really in the state of Maine that has a budget committee the size of 21 to 25 people. Most of them are 7 to 9, and the select board is the one that appoints budget committees in these towns. We are still keeping it an elected position, but we're reducing the number.
I really like the idea. I think that 21 is really unwieldy. But I would suggest to go even farther, to go to 3 members and 2 alternates, because once again, I think that that some committees get too big, and people don't. And if you have a fewer number, they may pay more attention to the nitty gritty. The other thing is the budget committee doesn't have all that much power, because the Board of Selectmen can sort of overrule it. As I see it, as practically anything. So I'd much rather have 3 to 5 people really paying attention than trying to fill 21 or even 9 slots. Just a thought.
Well, on that note about what you said about the budget select board overruling the budget committee, the budget committee puts forth their recommendation, the select board puts forth theirs, and both of those are showing on the warrant. So they're not really overruling it, they're just a difference of opinion. And I've served on that budget committee for over 12 years when it was big. And I find that sitting at that table, a lot of people come forward with different ideas depending on what part of the town they're in. It makes a difference. And I think it's better with more rather than less. So.
And do you find, and this is certainly meant respectfully.
Would you get closer to the microphone, Jonathan? I'm worried that your audio is not being picked up.
Yeah, it's also a little short for me. Do you find that a substantial percentage of the 21 people were really engaged in all the issues?
Well, most of the time when I was on that committee, we always had it one time in 13 years, we didn't have a quorum. And most of the time, if they're not engaged, they're asking good questions. So because it's staggered on those 3-year terms, so sometimes you have people that they're brand new and they really have not seen this before. And then you've got the people that have been there 3 years with the institutional memory. And so there's a good, healthy conversation going on.
If I could give just a little bit of my experience, and I don't mean to take up much time. I've been on we've had public hearings in the school, the 2 districts in the school thing for the past 2 years. As far as I know, I'm the only person who's ever asked questions in the 2 years that the thing has been going on. And if you think about it, I think it's about 2/3 of our tax dollars go to the school district. Mm-hmm. So in fact, it's actually more important economically to know what's happening in the budget of the school. Mm-hmm. And I think that, so my point is that I don't have a lot of confidence, and I really respect your 12 years of being on a committee. I think that that's fabulous, that a lot of the public is actually is doing a lot of diligence into the budget. And so I'd rather, and I certainly appreciate it, once again, your long service on it. I'd rather we have people who are intimately involved and can give you the pluses and the minuses. You know, it's one thing to say the garden club should have $5,000 and somebody else says it's $3,000, but you know, you've got to have the full gestalt of the budget to make any decision. You can't just say, that sounds like a good idea. It's got to be balanced. So you need people, particularly in the budget, who I think are not special interest people, but trying to look at the whole picture.
Thank you. I'd like to make one comment. Karen mentioned quorums, and if you go to too small a committee, you'll have difficulty. The number of people in a quorum becomes 3 if you have 3 and 2 alternates, if everybody's there, and then you're stuck. I mean, if it's 3 and the 2 alternates don't come, so you can't have too few because of quorum issues.
Right.
That is one thing to take into consideration.
I think that's a great point, but I think that 3 is a perfect number, and with a smaller committee, I think people are more able to tailor it to their schedule. Hey, Monday night's the Super Bowl, let's not do it, let's not do it there, it's fireworks, let's shift it to another day. But I appreciate your comments as well.
Thank you.
Jonathan, I think another way that we've responded to your concerns is under the current charter, budget committee members are not allowed to succeed themselves. It's 3 years and you're gone. That wasn't always enforced, we found out, but that's what the rules say. We thought that that was silly and that there's real benefit to having people who've been there for half a dozen years and have been through this many times, are very comfortable with it, understand what the issues are. So now you can do 3 terms successively and then you have to take a year off and you can come back and do 3 terms again if you want.
I think that's great. I really like the term limit thought, but the budget committee, there's a learning curve, I think. I think that therefore it makes perfect sense to me to have more than, I would rather have somebody who's been on it longer than shorter. So I really agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to say something?
No.
No.
I'm listening. Sorry. That's my last name. My last name's Hurd. I listen.
No. One of the things that has been discussed is how to vote on the budget in open town meeting, and whether we ought to consider going to voting by secret ballot as a rule. As you know, for the last 2 years, because of COVID, we have had to vote on the budget by secret ballot. Some people who have an interest in that believe it's more democratic. There's a wider representation of voters weighing in versus the number of people that show up at a town meeting. The difficulty with making that change, and there are town meeting forms of government that always vote on the budget by secret ballot, but it really requires the select board to hold a final public hearing in April. It adds more time between the budget formation and the vote, and it reduces the opportunity for citizen comment and impact. Because at an open town meeting, citizens can come and make an amendment to the budget, discuss it, and vote on it, and they have the power in a town meeting to do that. That isn't the instance if you're voting by secret ballot on either the select board recommendation or the budget committee's recommendation. Yes, Peter.
I guess just to express my personal feeling, I think changing it to a secret ballot going forward would be unfortunate. It gives the town meeting, the floor vote gives the citizens of the town of Camden, those who choose to attend, as you said, the opportunity to change the budget. Unlike the school budget meetings, which you can ask all the questions you want, but you can't change the budget, and that's what goes to the voters after the fact. Personally, I think that allowing people to have questions and answer them and then vote to change the budget or not at the floor meeting makes a lot of sense and should be preserved going forward. I want to go back just a second in terms of the makeup of the budget committee. I guess I would differ. I think having more than 3, having 9 makes a lot of sense because it gives you the opportunity to actually have a greater, what's the word I'm looking for? Institutional memory. And that, to me, is very important, whether it's the Budget Committee, Board of Selectmen, Select Board, or any committee, having some a greater understanding of what has happened in the past can help to inform what happens in the future and possibly head off mistakes.
Thank you.
I'd like to respectfully disagree with Peter, because I'm afraid that special interests are overrepresented in budget meetings. So you want something done, and I don't want to pick on any special group because I don't have any axe to grind that way. But if you want something done, you get 25 of your best friends from Camden to come here. It'll fill up a room like this, and it gets approved. I think that special interests are something that the government's got to keep in check, and I think that we need to sort of limit that sort of thing. And if you have a process where the whole town has the opportunity to consider something, not something done on a Tuesday night in whatever wintry month we're talking.
June. Our annual town meeting, we vote on the budget in June.
But I think that I'd much rather have the whole town being able to consider something than the number of people who are going to come into a room for a budget meeting.
Jonathan, I want to thank you for the emails regarding that. And since you've already expressed your opinion, I won't read your email at the end of the meeting to put it in the record since you've spoken to it. That's all right.
I do feel that, it gives rise to more consideration of the issues, I think, rather than something, I always think of, gosh, I should have said something, and it comes to me an hour later, a day later. And this way, you get a little more, the public gets a little more time to consider if those dollars are being well spent.
Right. I do want to add a note for people that are watching, and Jonathan, the Charter Commission is planning to go to the Select Board meeting on August the 24th, next Tuesday, to request that they put a non-binding straw poll question on the November ballot, asking the voters if they have any interest in the town evaluating whether we should vote on the budget by secret ballot. It's not, should we do it? It's, do you favor having the Select Board evaluate? And any recommendation they make would have to go through the regular public hearing process. But it's to gauge voters' interest and whether they want to even explore the idea of voting on secret ballot. So it's non-binding. It's not making the change. It's not requiring the Select Board to do it. It's really just a straw poll to find out if there is interest out there in studying it, because it's a big change and there are a lot of processes that would have to change if we went that road.
Important discussion, is there any downside to making that straw poll address the issue more directly? Do you want to go to a secret ballot? And that way, everybody, including the town, the Select Board, you all, know what people think. I think it eliminates a little bit of possibility for miscommunication.
The issue of asking that directly is that it is not a straightforward process, and I think that people need to have the opportunity to be educated on what that would mean on the whole budget approval process, starting from scratch. And there are many different ways of doing it, voting by secret ballot. So I think it takes more public education before asking that direct question, do you favor going to secret ballot? That's how we came to that decision to do it, a straw poll, to study it. Did you want to? No.
Not on that issue. I wanted to back up on the Budget Committee itself. I've been looking at this. I don't see any place here that says how would we replace one of those people on the Budget Committee that drops off, moves away,
Why don't we check
Yeah.
on that on the 25th?
Okay.
I think it's traditionally done by select board appointment. It has been. But we could check on that on the 25th. There was another option. Do we add language in case of a declared emergency that would allow the select board to place all town articles, including the budget, on secret ballot? But I think our town attorney, Bill Kelly, sort of solved that issue because of the governor's declared emergency. I think that that was already covered in state statute, and that doesn't need to be added to the charter. Is that correct, Bill? And emergency funding, I think I mentioned this earlier. We have proposed, in addition to the charter, that would allow the select board, after a public hearing, to add additional funding in the case of emergency affecting public health, welfare, or safety. It caps it at a certain percentage of the municipal budget. It would only be used as a last resort, and it adds some flexibility for the select board to respond to an emergency. And I will say, we've had a lot of discussion about this, about whether it's necessary, because we do have surplus account where funds can be used in case of an emergency, as well as the town's contingency fund, why this would be in here just purely as a last resort.
And it's the current proposal is that it be capped at 1.5% of the municipal budget, so fairly small total dollars. It requires a public hearing, and at the public hearing, it requires a supermajority vote, so 4 affirmatives from the select board to go through with it. So we're really trying to treat it as something very, very different from the normal path that funding decisions are made. And hopefully, it will never have to be used.
Yes, Peter? Should have added
I think it's a great point, Lowry, that it would not be allowed, they wouldn't be allowed to raise taxes.
Right.
That means the money has to come from somewhere else.
Has to come from the
Surplus.
The budget already allows the select board to move funds from one budget item to another in cases when there's a need, if I remember correctly. Would this be redundant?
No, I think that requirement in the charter is at the last, starting in April, is that right, Bill? Sort of the last 2 full months of the year, the select board can move from one to another.
I don't remember, that's why I'm asking.
I believe that's it. It's only a short period of time at the end of the year. In order, for instance, to cover an overdraft in another
Right.
budgetary account, the select board can move it, but it's only, I believe, April and May that can happen.
You're probably right, yeah.
And I think that this would truly be an emergency thing if you got to that point in the year and there wasn't any money to move around.
Right.
And there was some kind of super crisis, it would give you some wiggle room to get some additional funding.
Here, I'll give you specific language. The select board may, by an affirmative vote of 4 select board members, may authorize additional appropriations for the then current operating budget to be funded from either A, unanticipated revenues, or B, from the town's undesignated fund balance or surplus for any emergency affecting the public health, safety, or welfare. And again, it talks about the 1.5% exclusive of, and it's exclusive of the school and county budgets. It's
Right.
only the town of Camden budget that the 1.5% would be.
So this would be the only case in which, as you see it, the select board would have the authority to increase spending without a town meeting vote,
That is correct.
correct? Okay, think about that.
Well, it's really for emergencies, Peter. We've talked about this, and I said, just think what would happen if there was a breach in the Seabright Dam, and we needed to fix it pronto. It's that kind of an emergency where life and limb is at risk.
I appreciate that. We have seen the select board in the past. Some of us have been on the board when this has happened. It doesn't take very long to hold a special town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The next section is endowment funds and gift management, and it's completely new. It creates and outlines the policy for managing endowment funds and gifts to the town. If you have any questions, Lowry is
This is largely stating the way things have been handled for the past many years, but it just wasn't put into a document so that if there were new people who came on board to lead the town, they'd be able to refer to that and say, okay, this is the way we handle these situations. There's really nothing of real significance that's changed there.
just that it's never been
Never been stated.
off, an authentic policy or procedure. Article 7 is brand new. It's growth management, and the purpose is to apply the state statute, but to create and make sure that there's a municipal growth management program. We've added, the planning board is not in the charter other than mentioned, so it just lists the planning board membership and their duties that weren't previously in the charter. It adds a review of the zoning ordinance in consistency with the comp plan. It requires having a zoning map, and it also provides for the select board to create a comprehensive plan committee. And they can appoint a committee, and we have it up to 11 voting members to include 5 members of the planning board. Implementation is a responsibility of the select board. So it provides a mechanism for the long-range planning, and I think we've changed that. Have we not, Bill? You recommended that it should say may and not shall on an implementation program?
We changed the must to may in the introductory paragraph.
Oh, in the introductory paragraph, okey-doke. So if there is a comprehensive plan, there needs to be an implementation program. Otherwise, it sits on the shelf.
What does it mean, up to 11 voting members? Does it specify you have to have 6 member, that's kind of vague.
Well, we're saying that it can be 11 members, and 5 of them need to be planning board members.
So could it be 6 members, 5 of whom are members of the planning board?
Could?
Yeah, you would have a minimum of 5 members. If no one that's not a member of the planning board chooses to volunteer.
Article 8 is about nominations and elections, and we've just made 2 changes. One, it's stating in here that the Budget Committee does not have to go through the petition nomination process or a nominating committee, but they complete an interest form instead. And we're changing what's currently in the charter, reducing the required number of signatures on a petition to 25 from 75 in order to match the current state law. Current state law is 25 and our charter says 75, so we're correcting that. Article 9, we've expanded the language on conflict of interest to sort of to clarify the purpose of it. And we have new language for disclosure if you believe you have a conflict, and recusal, and applies to boards, commissions, committees, and employees. And then we added a section that describes the guidelines for the organization, record keeping, and filling of vacancies for all appointed boards and committees by the select board. And here's the answer to your question. Because we have in section 9.05 that we have the guidelines for filling of vacancies for all appointed boards and committees.
Okay.
So that would cover the budget
That would
committee.
cover that.
So we don't
Okay.
need to put it in 2 places. Article 10, which is about transition from the current charter to the revised charter. Well, we haven't finalized what the revised charter is, so that article will be written. And the final report also, when we come up with any final changes, we will write the final report. And we have expanded and updated the glossary. And the next public meeting is today. We've had it. And again, I'll repeat that comments can be emailed to charter@camdenmaine.gov. Printed copies are still available in the town office and the Camden Public Library, and will also, as we change the current draft that's out there, as we update it, we will also put out the new final proposed revision. And it's also available online on the website. Are there any, are there any other general comments or questions? Our next step is to have a meeting here on the 25th to discuss and finalize some outstanding items that we have and to take all of your comments into consideration as we come up with what the final proposed revision will be. And we will be going to the Select Board on the 21st of September with the warrant language to put approval of the revised charter on the town ballot.
Say our next meeting's on the 25th?
Yeah,
Yes, next Wednesday for us.
Week from today.
he didn't get one of these.
No, I know, he wasn't, yeah,
26th.
if you would. And Bob, there's the agenda for next week's meeting and the backup materials.
Thank you.
Peter, you had a question or comment?
One final comment, I guess, or two. Thank you again for all your hard work. I think you've done a great job.
Thanks, Peter.
Appreciate everybody's involvement and time on this, because I know what it takes to be on a committee like this. That said, I commend you and hope you will continue to stick to your guns on not increasing the authority or power of the Select Board over what we've talked about tonight and what they currently have. Having been on the Select Board of Selectmen at that time, and watching how other city form of government operate, it's sometimes been, kind of envious because they could change the zoning or change the budget without having public hearings. But that only works if you support that particular change. And I would hate to see us move in that direction. The town meeting form of government is worked, and it needs to be updated and so forth, and you've done a great job. Thank you.
I would be remiss if I didn't put into the record, we did receive 2 other emails, one from Deb Oliver, a citizen of Camden, and also Hildy Ellis. And they both say they are unable to attend the meeting tonight. I'll read Hildy's letter first for the record. I'm unable to attend the meeting on August 18th. I did not realize this was the last opportunity for public input on the town charter. Given the past 18 months of COVID's disruption of life in general and meeting attendance in specific, I request the Commission extend the period of public input on the charter. I know that life goes on despite a pandemic, but several folks I've spoken to with are not aware of this deadline. Thank you for your consideration in delaying the closing of the public input to this document. And Deborah Oliver, dear members of the Town of Camden Charter Commission, I am unable to attend your meeting on 18 August, but would like to convey that due to the delays and disruptions caused by COVID-19 pandemic, it might be prudent for the Commission to delay finalizing the revised charter, which I understand you intend to do, to put before the voters on the November 2021 ballot. I've spoken to a handful of otherwise well-informed Camden residents who are not aware that the charter was about to be closed to public input, and they are dismayed that they are unable to review the proposed charter language in time for the Commission to consider their input. You have been hard at work for months, and it's important that your work not be finalized in a vacuum, but in light of public discussion and input. Again, given the pandemic delays and disruptions, which have not abated and in fact are on the increase again, and given the importance of a charter that incorporates public input, I ask the Commission vigorously seek public input over the next 9 months with the goal of putting the final charter to a vote in November 2022. Respectfully, Deborah Oliver. And Jean, I will give those to you for the record.
Thank you.
And
Maybe we should add for the record that all of our regular meetings of the commission were listed in the town calendar and were open to the public. And from time to time, we had some people come by who wanted to share their ideas with them. So this has been, it's been a public process for 2 years, not for just the last month and a half.
And a reminder to Charter Commission members, our next meeting is a week from today, 5:45 right here. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Thank you all very much for coming. And Bruce, thank you so much for manning the audio visual. And Bill Kelly, thank you for being here as well. And Jonathan, Peter, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate having your comments.